All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming in today. We have a great set of alumni panelists here, and they will share their experiences and answer your questions on the topic of clinical research. And as we go through this presentation, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat or use the raise hand feature and then ask your questions. And then we'll get started by asking each of the alumni to give us a brief, maybe 3 to 5 minute overview of their career path and their current role. And then we'll open it up for questions from the students. So Amy, if you would like to go first.
Always alphabetical order, isn't it? Sure, I'm used to going first. Hi, my name is Amy Chung. I am an Associate Director of Medical Writing and Transparency at Jazz Pharmaceuticals. I've been a medical writer for over 10 years now. Always loved storytelling with data ever since college, and grad school was a continuation of that. So I guess I'll start with college. I started college as an English major and defected to biochem my third year. And then I knew that I loved science and wanted to just go to that end of the journey wherever it was. And so went to grad school, explored biomedical engineering and pharmaceutical sciences, got my PhD in 2009. And I did a postdoc at UCLA for a year and a half just to confirm that I did indeed want to leave the bench. And so that experience, I think, confirmed that I wanted to leave the bench, leave academia and join industry, and joined a medical device company called Edwards Life Sciences. I was there for a few years as a scientific communications role / medical writing. Then went on to join a small biotech called Cuadro Biosciences with stem cell therapy. And then went to Amgen for a couple of years as a regulatory writer. Then ended up at Celgene, which later became acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb. Was there for a couple years, and then now I'm at Jazz Pharmaceutical Sciences. So my fifth industry position, but I think this is it.
Awesome, thank you, Amy. Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, sure. Hey everyone, thanks for coming. My name's Charlie. I'm a fairly recent graduate. I graduated UW in May of 2020 amidst the pandemic, so that was an interesting last semester. I'm sure you're all experiencing your own version of that right now. But I was a double major actually in biochemistry and German. In college, I guess I like to start my career path here because it probably started with 3 years of research I did in a biochemistry lab. And I think all of that lab work really set the stage for sort of the rest of my career. You know, I talk about that in a lot of my interviews, things like that. But I think I was, after those 3 years, kind of really interested in learning a little bit about manufacturing. Which was kind of hard to explain to recruiters sometimes, but I think that if you have the right motivations and the right reasons and can explain why some transferable skills that you have, you know, how they apply to a different role, I think that's a great way to get into something that might not exactly fit the bill per se. And so that led me into an industry position, and I was an operations intern at a pharmaceutical company called AbbVie, which I know does some recruiting at UW-Madison. And then after my internship there, I decided I kind of wanted to travel and see a different part of the country because I was born and raised and lived my whole life in Wisconsin up to that point. And so then actually after college, I got an opportunity to work for a different pharmaceutical company on the East Coast, out in Philadelphia. And that company is Merck. And out here, I am a quality operations specialist. So I support the manufacturing shop floor from a quality perspective. And there's a lot that goes into that. So without diving too deep, you know, feel free to ask more questions about that later. But I guess I should also mention that in December, so in a few weeks here, I'm making the transition back into research. And I'm taking a scientist role joining the Merck research laboratories. So I guess in the coming months, if you have any further questions about what research looks like in industry versus what it looks like in academia, I guess in the coming months, I'd be able to answer those questions better. So nice to meet you all.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Hannah, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Great, so I'm Hannah, and I'll start at the beginning. When I entered back in 2006, I did not know what I wanted to do. And I was drawn to psychology classes. So I kind of just kept taking the classes, not really knowing if I would actually major in it, but then at some point it did. So I ended up getting my degree in psychology. And during that time, I was working in a lab, and the activities I was drawn to were a lot of the data management, a little bit of stats type stuff. So I started thinking maybe I wanted to do something with that, but wasn't really sure how to go about that. So after undergrad, I worked right out of the gate for the Department of Family Medicine at UW as a research coordinator. And that was a great role to get experience in all different aspects of research. But again, in that role, I really was drawn to the analysis and the data. So I decided to go to graduate school. I went to Northwestern and got my master's in biostats and epidemiology. And since then, I've been in statistician roles in academics, a little bit of tech, and primarily the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm currently a senior research statistician at AbbVie, the company that Charlie had mentioned a little bit ago. It's based in North Chicago. And in that role, I support safety analyses specifically. So it's a lot of like pooling different data sets and looking for signals and that sort of thing. It's great. I love it. I love working with data. I love all aspects of it. And throughout my time in academics, tech, and pharma, I've worked in a lot of like different type things. So I'm happy to answer questions on data management, programming, what it's like to be a statistician, career opportunities, that sort of thing.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Cuadro, would you like to go next?
All right, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Cuadro Usufori, and I'm in entrepreneurship. So I'm a startup guy, and we started a company called Satori Food Project, where we make little coffee pods enriched with vitamins and minerals for mental health. So mainly the whole thing is a consumer healthcare company. We built the product, and now we're going into building up the clinical trials to get it approved by the FDA as a medication for like workplace burnout, anxiety, and things like that. I wrote down some notes so I don't go through. So I always wanted to start my own business, even before going into graduate school. And so with that, I decided to go the PhD route instead of the MBA because I'm just more interested in science, and I felt like I wanted to be the creator or the inventor of the product. So I wanted to make sure that I knew everything I could about the cell and how to develop medicines in order to build the company. So when I graduated, I did a postdoc in infectious disease, where we studied the interaction between bacterial infections and viral infections. And then I ended up getting an opportunity to get a fellowship with the Kauffman Foundation for Entrepreneurship. So with that, they did lean startup training. We got a chance to go out to the East Coast and learn a little bit about what's happening in the Boston startup atmosphere. Then we went out to Silicon Valley and learned a bit more about that, and learned about design, and had an opportunity to intern at a medical device company doing venture research. So from there, while I was at the postdoc, I had a girlfriend, now my wife, kind of thing. And so we decided to move to Milwaukee. And when I came back, I needed a job. So I ended up getting into government, which is the, I'm trying to think of how it's called, the infectious disease lab for the government. So the people of public health labs who are tracing a lot of the COVID things that are going on right now. I would have been knee deep in managing the tracing of COVID and all of that through the lab management. And so with that, we got grants to study the genetic drift of gonorrhea to see if any of the things that are happening with STDs are building up resistance, and learned a lot about just infectious disease. And then I decided to go out and try to start my own company. So I left to build coffee creamers. And then that failed because I thought that it was a lot. I got a good perspective on what it really takes to build a business. So I went back into academia and taught for Concordia University for a little bit. And that ended up being great. So I ended up getting a grant with the National Science Foundation to build the product that we have now, to be able to do qualitative research with it. And now I started again, I tried again to build it up, and this time it's more successful. And so with that, we're on Amazon and it's going well. So the next step is to do the clinical research, which is happening next year.
Great, thank you, Cuadro. All right, so now that we've heard from the alumni, students, you're able to ask questions. You can put your questions into the chat and then I can read them out to the alumni, or you can just use the raise hand feature and yeah, I can give you access to speak. But yeah, the first question that we have is, what advice would you have for students who want to go into this field, and what should students be doing to prepare themselves to be successful in this field?
So I think at UW, you have so many different labs and research environments available to you. So some advice that I might give would be to even ask. I think it's really tempting to just like jump right in and be like, I need to get in a lab, I have to work in a lab. But I think finding the right fit for you is going to be highly beneficial for your future career. So I think even asking for informational interviews about the type of lab that something does can really help you decide what route you want to go, because there's bench that is very different than human subjects research. I mean, some bench is human subjects, but they're totally different. So I think trying to hone in on your own interest will be really helpful, because if you're passionate about what you do and you like what you do, that'll really set you up well for success once you enter, the actual workforce.
Yeah, and just to pile on to what Hannah said, everything she said is true. Resources at UW are great. Your passion and drive will take you really far. And definitely UW campus is full of amazing resources and opportunities for you to take advantage of. I mean, even participating in a clinical research probably is also one route to go. What I would add to that is, clinical research, at least, just even in industry alone, entire companies are built on clinical research alone, right? There's so many different aspects of clinical research. There's the operational piece, there's the compliance piece, there's the scientific piece, there's the statistical piece, the safety piece, all sorts of angles that you can approach it. So it's really an industry of its own, and there are many different angles. So I guess I would really look deep within your personality and where your niche would be based on your personality, and really what your drives and passions and interests, and really back to the personality piece, and what your weaknesses and strengths can where those can take you in terms of a niche in this very big world of clinical research. Because there's plenty of opportunity. You might see different titles that you may or may not know what they're about, but if you really know your core personality and your strengths and weaknesses, you can start there and start to pick out a list of titles that would match you and your skill sets.
And I'll also add it's totally okay to change your mind. I started out in a bench lab in the surgery department. After 2 years, moved to a psych lab. Obviously, as I said, my career, I've been in a lot of different roles. There's no rules. It is totally fine to switch gears.
I think one thing too that you can focus on, maybe even in your coursework day to day, is some of the team projects, or like, I don't know where you all are in your careers, but I know a lot of majors have capstone type projects. In the work industry and where I work, everything is really team based. And so while I might not have to remember a specific fact from my upper level biochemistry class, like I remember we had to memorize the pathway, the insulin signaling pathway, I very much do have to Yeah. Boo. I very much do have to work in teams every day and use, like problem solving skills. And so I think focusing, I think looking back on my college career, I think had I focused a little bit more on that and not just the memorization of facts, I think I would have been even more prepared for a career in this industry. And I know that's hard to do sometimes because you want to do well in school, and sometimes passing an exam means memorizing the facts. But I think it's also important to try to do your best to focus on some of those other broader skills, such as like teamwork and problem solving and critical thinking. Those are all definitely come into play.
You know, what Charlie said is so true. When I started grad school, I received a very key advice from senior members was grad school equals B. And, you know, being a lifetime nerd, I don't think that really set well with me. You know, a B, you know, what is that? But it's true. I've never once used my GPA outside of grad school to do anything with it. So, you know, what Charlie's saying is true, is, you know, rather than, you know, getting that perfect, you know, acing that Krebs cycle, you know, test, you could spend that time, you know, exploring other pathways and interests.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, in terms of the people in the room, where is everybody at? Are they finishing up their bachelor's degrees or in graduate school? What's the makeup of the room?
Yes, students, if you could put that in the chat, what year in school you're in, and maybe your major as well, that would be great. So freshman. Someone is a junior, freshman, majoring in global health and genetics. Fourth year PhD in molecular and cellular pharmacology, studying neuropharm. That's a mouthful, but yes, that's really great. And junior. So I think a few juniors, PhD student, and freshmen.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, then I think that what Charlie and Amy is saying is correct. Like, make sure that you explore everything that you have on campus. Those during the summer when you're doing your summer research, or even looking for positions, there are ways to get paid if you're in healthcare in health sciences in general, to do summer research. So you can always find a job on campus and be able to stay around and hang out. And then getting those capstone courses and like certificates from the School of Professional Development there. I know that I did something having to do with project management that was really helpful. And so those things actually can even help you get through school a lot better too, a lot easier as well. Yeah. Project management, I think, is key, learning how to do that. Yeah.
100%. I mean, project management can be the difference between you getting promoted and someone not once you're working. It's huge. Like that, I couldn't agree with that more.
Great, thank you all for answering that. Another question is, you talked a little bit about your educational background. We would like to ask, where did you start looking for your first job? Where did you start looking for the job that you're currently in? Just how did you get started?
Well, since this is my first job after college, I guess, maybe I can start here. I started, I guess, by leveraging my network, people I knew from internships and people I had known from the research I had done, even, friends of family members, reaching out, just talking to them. Some people call it like an informational interview. That sounds a little too formal to me. I would just like to call it networking, but it can go a long way. In the end, I kind of don't really fit the bill though, because I ended up getting this job just from applying online. which I wouldn't necessarily suggest. I think I kind of got fortunate. But I think a good starting point is for some of you maybe building a network, and then those of you later on learning more how to leverage that. I think that's definitely the way to go. I hear it all the time. It's not always what you know, it's who you know. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's like I put in a lot of applications when I was coming out of both undergraduate and graduate school. And that didn't really, there wasn't like a big efficacy there. Like it was very small amount to even get an interview and then go through that. Every job that I've ever had is because of someone, well, not every job, after college, every job that I've ever had came through someone I knew. And so I think a key thing would be, I know for me and undergraduate especially, you could find an advocate, like a professor or somebody who you could talk to and just build a relationship with, like one or two professors. I know that you'll have like a bunch of professors throughout your whole career, but just pick one or two that are cool. And that's the main thing that you look for, is just that they're cool. You know, it doesn't have to be some big prestigious person or anything like that. They're cool and they'll be able to like point you in the direction for other places. It is a who you know thing. If you want to get the best bang for your buck.
Yeah, for me, I definitely agree that having a network helps. I didn't utilize that coming out of undergrad, and I regret it. That's why when people are like, what should I do? I'm like, use the resources available to you, because one, it's like a little bit harder to re-engage, not impossible, but just harder. So I applied to so many jobs online when I was coming out of undergrad, primarily focusing on, I knew I kind of wanted to be like a research coordinator. So I essentially went on like all major university websites and just applied for jobs. And one thing that I think kind of helped is I did spend a lot of time tailoring my application to the specific job. It does take a lot more time to write a cover letter. I mean, now even cover letters maybe are a little bit phasing out, but at the time, I think it was pretty much required. And same with the resume. So if I was applying for a lab that was dealing with disease, I like highlighted a class that maybe talked about that, or something that I did to try and show like I am qualified. So I do think that's really important. It can seem minor and it's like, how close are people looking? But I know from being on hiring committees and sorting through thousands of resumes, I mean, if someone has experience in the subject matter of interest, that usually warrants a second look. So that's something I definitely recommend if you're going the route of, really applying to tons of positions online.
I think I'm a case example of everything that I did wrong and everything I did the opposite of what Hannah was saying. So I remember wasting 6 months of my precious 20s just applying. That's all I did every day. I would just sit down, apply, and I wouldn't tailor my resume. I just would do that shotgun method. At the time it was 2008 is when the economy really started tanking and there weren't a whole lot of jobs out there. And coupled with that, I think my biggest issue was I just wanted a job. I just wanted to, graduate and join industry. And, it didn't pan out so well for me because I didn't actually take the time to just calm down and sit down and figure out what it is that I could offer and what my skills and my personality would offer to the specific position I would target. So I didn't take a targeted approach. I did a lot of flailing. Before I really just, it took me 6 months before I realized maybe I should just take a step back and do something different. So I did sit down and I made a list of everything, what do I like? And, the whole storytelling with data, writing grants, it was all pointing me in a direction that involved writing around the sciences. So, then I took my personality and my geographical location desires and things like that, just personal stuff. And then I really honed in on what position at what location I was looking for, and then really looked around my network to see who could get me there. So, it's not like I went up to somebody in my network and said, hey, do you have something for me? Because there's really not much people can do with that. I asked them specifically, do you know if someone is looking for a PhD who could write? And so that took me to the medical writing position that started my whole career. And actually, the way I got there was through my sister's boyfriend at the time, who's now her husband, his brother-in-law's poker buddy. And so, it really doesn't hurt to put yourself out there, but be specific and be targeted for it. So because that whole experience was so traumatizing, and when you come out of school, it's really hard to know what you want when you don't even know what's out there. You don't know the positions that are out there, what sort of roles are in the government or industry or academic sector. In each sector, you just don't know everything that's there. It's sort of like a black box. So it's actually to shamelessly promote this book that Cuadro and I are writing, because we actually are writing a career book that's intended to help you through that whole process, so that nobody has to repeat what I went through, what Cuadro went through, with flailing for just looking for jobs with the shotgun method. So it's really intended to walk you through figuring out yourself, your personality, what sector you want to go to, and then what titles are available that you could really target. And just like Hannah said, tailor your resume. And if you do it right, it shouldn't be that hard, because it's meant, that position is meant for your personality and everything that you want anyway. So it's called The Perfect Science Career, and it's going to be available on pre-order soon within the month. So it's really meant to help students figure out their path the most efficient way, unlike the way that we went.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like what everybody's kind of saying, where it's like, you look at your personality, you look at your place. I mean, there's some people who are just like, look, I mean, I remember when Amy, she's like, I'm going to be in LA. And so it's like, that has to be a part of your job search, is where you want to be. I know for me, I was like looking all over the US at any major city, and it's a big waste of time. It can be. I can also say that, like, I'm looking at some of the majors here in health equity, global health. With those type of majors, I would look at your public health department, the Madison local public health department. They are always looking for students, for interns. A lot of these internships can be paid either through the government themselves, or your academic institution through some program. And that really starts to get you that job experience that you need to get that entry level job when you come out, because all the entry level jobs like need 3 to 5 years experience. And it's like, so I think that, like, when I looked at my time in government, we had a lot of people intern. I just saw some really proactive students that would come in, and with the people who are in, especially public health, the public health departments are super connected. I mean, they're connected to hospitals, connected to research labs, connected to all types of things in science. You'd be surprised. It's just like this network of people who are just like doing these conferences and everything like that. So I would get connected through that, and then go forward, especially when it comes to public health or global health. And from there, depending on, like, so right now, some people are freshmen or junior. From there, you could even go from the local level to your state level. The state lab is right there in Madison as well, state public health department. And then you could go national to go into the CDC, or to the, what's another one? I forget, USAID, yeah, for international development. And those are pretty cool, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for answering that. That was some really great advice, and thank you for sharing the name of the book as well. That's very cool. Another question is, what are the employment trends in your field or your company that students should know about?
I think it's probably, sorry, I think I'm going to cut you off. No surprise. I mean, science have taken off. I think there's actually, I know there's a data science at UW, major at UW now, which there was not back when I was there. So in terms of trends, I mean, there's just so many jobs in the space. So if you do have an interest in data or statistics, I mean, you can find things in a bunch of different industries. And I think another thing that's really nice is, I think for a while, stats was something you needed an advanced degree for. And I think depending on the role, that maybe still holds true. But I think because the space has taken off in the way it has, there are a lot more entry-level roles that can help you get to a statistician career without actually going to grad school, if that's something that's of interest to you.
Cool. Well, I'm in entrepreneurship, so startups, and so I know that's it's a big topic now on campus, and just I think throughout the states in general, building your own company, getting together, put things together. So I'm a little bit older than people are now when they're starting businesses. So with that, I would say, especially at UW, if you just even like raise your hand and say, "Hey, I want to build a company," like the whole skies will open to just try to help you out. Especially so like with that, you have the research park on Whitney Way, where like there are a lot of different companies that are starting up out of there. Trying to think of what else. Generators out there, they're very big. And then some of your professors or some of the professors around, if you look, they've all got their small companies that they're building. And just what Dr. Chung said, it's like they're building it based on clinical research and leveraging the university's machinery, assets, knowledge to build their companies. And so you don't have to like be the person who like has the idea and starts up and tries to lead. If I had to do it over again, I would have actually looked for a startup to join first. And especially I would tell people, look for a venture-backed startup. So a startup that has money. So it's like, unless, you know, you and your friends get together, you decide you want to put something together. But you, I think as a scientist, play a very key role in startup because of the way we think. The problem solving, that scientific method, you'd be surprised. Like we're around a lot of scientists now, all of us, but a lot of people, once you step out of science, don't think like that. They don't have that, you know, critical thinking to solve problems. They're not excited about it. They get anxiety about it. And so if you come into that, just even being around, you're going to be a big value asset. So if it comes to going into startups, I would say generator, looking at the professors that are around and starting to hang out at these networking events. They have like this beer and biotech or something going on in Madison, and just networking around. And everybody in the startup world is pretty cool. It's going to be a lot of fun if you decide to go into that world.
I guess I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum in the corporate world. But I think also having participated in some hiring panels, I think one thing in the corporate world is, as far as hiring trends go, is that especially during interviews, looking for people that already have some of those soft skills built. I don't think that when you're looking at job positions and you're reading the descriptions online, that you necessarily have to fit the bill 100%. And so I encourage you to apply to, you know, when you get to that point that you're interested in, as I think from the is that, you know, someone that has some of those soft skills is going to get preference in the position over someone who might fit the bill on paper more exactly, but someone that, you know, already has maybe project management skills or works really well in teams, is really personable, likable person. And so again, I think I go back to some of those soft skills as far as, you know, hiring trends go, and to not be afraid to apply to positions that you might not exactly fit the bill for, because you know, I fit the bill exactly for a position that was hiring chemical engineers. You know, I was a biochemistry major, and you know, when I first see the interview, so. That would be the advice I have.
For as a hiring trends go, I think everyone, you know, summarized everything perfectly, and I don't have too much to add except there are, you know, niches being created, niches. I don't know, however you pronounce that. You know, there are specific, you know, job titles that are constantly coming up every day, actually. I think looking at some of the majors, which on a side note, I think it's so great to see so many undergrads. You know, I think you guys are being very proactive, thinking ahead, and you know, this is great to see that you guys are proactively really working on your careers and thinking long term. You know, the health economics field wasn't as big of a thing a few years ago, and now I just see it all over the place. So real world evidence, health economics, medical liaisons, you know, those are new positions that I see coming out in the public domain all the time. So, you know, there are being new job titles created all the time. And so, you know, I think your traditional kind of, even with clinical, like a clinical research scientist, there could be multiple, you know, subtitles to that. It could be somebody that does connects the bridge between animal research and clinical research in humans. And so there could be a new, you know, specialized position for that. There could be, you know, like medical writer, but there could also be a sub-regulatory writer who only deals with, you know, interactions to the FDA, or somebody who's doing publications or doing both. You know, so there's all sorts of stratifications that I'm noticing in industry, at least, and you know, there's a lot of interesting new titles out there that, you know, you could explore. So yeah, have an open mind and just, you know, be curious and look through some of these new positions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, with what Amy said is definitely correct. It's like there are these huge fields that are opening up these days about communicating, right? So like we have a lot of knowledge, like you said, Krebs cycle, insulin cycles, and all those things. And it's like if you talk about it like the book talks about it, then only the people around you know what that is like, and so it becomes kind of like a small niche. What science is doing nowadays is saying, okay, can we have somebody who understands Krebs cycle and can explain it to a lay audience? You know, do we have somebody who could look at data, like Hannah was saying, and be able to translate it into something that someone can understand and appreciate? And so with those, it's just like what Charlie was saying, the soft skills around are the big important things. If you like to go out and party and network and all these things, and then you get into the biochem lab and it's very serious, everybody's walking around with their iPods in and stuff like the iPods, it's like iPhones and whatever, earphones. But it's like everybody's doing that. And so like if you're able to break out and say, okay, I could go back and forth between those worlds, you become very valuable. And I think it's what Charlie is saying. If you can show that in the interview that you're just like you're cool, and then you can like talk about things in both ways, and like the jargon of our fields, and then also you could explain it to an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old. That's going to make it that's going to be, I think, the future of science in general. I think that the robots are going to take over the scientific research with the high throughput screening and all that. So, you know, we're just going to have to learn how to use the machines. That's what it comes down to in pharma. And then everybody else is going to be figuring out how do we take this data and share it to everybody else. I don't think, you know, I don't see there being too many bench positions out there in the next 10 years. I would give it. Sorry, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, during some of my interviews, I quite literally got asked questions like, what do you like to do for fun? Or like, what are your plans for this weekend? And I think those are intended to just see what you're like as a person, if you can talk real to someone.
Yeah, I must say I've gone through now like 30 interviews now at this company alone, and you just at some point, you know, your resume is your resume, so I know the technical skills they bring to the table. So I ask questions like that, like, what do you like to do, you know, or, you know, tell me about a time where, you know, you overcame a difficult situation or personality, or, you know, are you you know, I'm more interested in the person and kind of the how looking to see how they'll fit on the team and the culture, because technical skills I already know from their, you know, resume and LinkedIn.
Yeah, especially for the PhDs that are in the room, there's a bit of a stereotype about us. So overcome that stereotype about
Just a little
being
bit
rigid. Yeah.
One thing when in talking about trends that I thought of that I'm seeing a lot more of is like having to do a take-home assignment or maybe give a short presentation as part of the interview process. So I say this just more as a heads up. Maybe everyone on this call is already aware, but that's something that is newer to me. I've been in my role since November, so about a year. And in applying for this role, and I was applying for a few other things, I had several take-home assignments, and for my role specifically, I had to give a 1-hour presentation. I think that's a little less standard, but just something to have a heads up about when talking about trends coming down the line.
Great, thank you for answering that. So another question is, what were and what are your most important considerations when choosing a job?
I think I had mentioned this is my 5th company. And so, it's not uncommon, especially, folks in the West Coast biotech area to move around quite a bit. And given my job, I typically come in when we're getting ready to submit an application for marketing a drug to the FDA. And once we get the application, it takes typically about a 1.5 to 2 years, depending on the scope. But once that's done, you're kind of sitting around, and I just get really bored. And so I'm really used to the high pace. I like a work hard, play hard culture, but I do like the stability that, I do like the work hard, play hard startup culture, but I do want stability as well. So, I've been kind of looking for that perfect fit. And, the reason I said I think this is it, is the current job that I have, and again, it's different for everybody, but it's just big enough that, there is a system in place, there's that stability, but there's also that culture of fun and work hard, play hard, and the camaraderie. And so, it really depends on what you want. But I think culture for me was a big thing. And, you spend a lot of time with these people, just like your lab mates, right? Like you spend a lot of time working side by side with these people, solving problems together all the time. So for me, it was really the people and the company mission and how much they cared about patients at the other end.
I looked at pay for like money, to just be able to say, is this more money than I was making before? That's just pretty much my MO with all of this. And then another thing too is I really look into autonomy. Like what Amy was saying, you have to know yourself and your personality. I don't like working with a lot of people. I like to just have either like my own project or maybe just a couple of people that I report to. But in terms of like sitting down for these meetings, especially when I was at government, sitting down with meetings for like with 10 people every week, things creeping along slowly really stresses me out, So I like to be able to just strategize and say, okay, what's a problem that needs to be solved in this company? And then I could just go off to my office and figure something out and then figure out how to roll it out. So, and when I go into any interview, and luckily I think for each of these jobs that I've had after school, it's been like that where, with the postdoc, it's like, hey, we just got this grant. We've got a couple of pieces of data, build it out into like a research paper or a field to get a bigger grant, right? And then same thing in the government. It's like they knew that they needed some more efficiency or operations, things going around with their testing. We don't know what we're doing. Come in, figure it out. And then even the same thing with the university. It's like we're starting this fellowship program. We want researchers to that are in the world to come into the university and just learn about teaching and teach with real world experience, build it out. And so I've been pretty comfortable in those positions. So I think that's another thing to look into is like, do you like working? Well, I think, yeah, do you like working with a team or not? I think more than likely you are going to be working with a team in clinical research. So yeah.
So initially for me, oh, go ahead, Charlie.
It's okay, go.
Okay, I was gonna say initially for me, coming out of undergrad, I just wanted a job. Like I wanted a job that somewhat used the skills I learned in undergrad. So I really wasn't picky. I was applying all over. That actually ended up being a barrier because not all places will like fund your travel out to an interview. So I ran into a spot with a couple of positions where they're like, we'd like to bring you out from an interview, but you have to, fund it. And that was something I wasn't in a position to do, having not like made money throughout undergrad. So that's something to keep in mind. And also just kind of like, for me, it was kind of like, I don't know if that's then for me. And then as time has went on and had the opportunity to get some years of experience and maybe had a little more leverage, things like geographic location, whether or not you can work remotely, like all those kind of intangibles. Well, money's tangible, but have become. And for me in particular, like the biggest thing when deciding to make the switch from academic to industry was the growth opportunity for not having a doctorate. So in academics specifically, and again, it depends on the school, it depends on the place, you can run into a ceiling effect without a PhD. And that's something I hit when I was a statistician in academics. So leaving that and joining industry, I mean, what the main question I asked everywhere was, what are the opportunities for master's level statisticians to grow in this company? Are there positions that you're not eligible for? Tell me about that. So at this point in my career, that becomes the biggest thing is I don't want to be limited by not having a PhD. And for me, industry has doesn't have as much of those limitations that I was facing.
Okay, that's great. I think everyone so far has given really, really great advice. I kind of have had two more specific criteria for me. Maybe I was a little pickier, so to say. I don't know. And I think one of those things was that I wanted to join what I think a lot of bigger-ish companies are starting nowadays. Are these things called like rotational programs? And so that's one way I narrowed down my search, and something I was really looking for. A company where I could come in and, after 6 or 8 months, switch to another role, learn about a new position. And I think these rotational programs offer a lot of great opportunities because you can learn different aspects of the business in a shorter period of time. And I think, in my opinion, that makes you, in the long term, more promotable, more desirable down the road. The other really cool piece about that was it kind of felt like I was joining a new cohort of college members, because the team working with this past year and a half have all been graduates, all 20 something. Really really awesome for me, especially having East. It's a built-in network, built-in friend group. We report to slightly different bosses, but for the most part, I work with 20-something-year-olds, and I really like that. And the other thing I was looking for was a company that I had this career goal to go back for a PhD at some point in my career. And so I was looking for a company that might invest in me and help me do that. And so in the current company I work for, if you do go back to school, they end up paying for some or all of it, which is a huge benefit because we all know school is expensive here. And so I think that's another way you can ask companies, and they like having that conversation with you, because I think that a company that values their employees' career development will also value their educational development, and in that sense, help you pay for it.
Awesome. Thank you all for answering that. Students, we have time for one more question. So if you guys have a question, then just put it in the chat or unmute yourself, and then you can ask that question. All right. So the final question for the session today is, what is one final piece of advice that you would give to students who are hoping to start or continue their journey in clinical research?
I would say the The final piece of advice is this, is that when you come out with your degree, there are thousands of other people who come out with the same degree. The thing that's going to make you more competitive is you. What you like, what you don't like, how you are, X, Y, Z. So take time to really, how do I put it? Try as many things as possible. I know everybody gives you the same advice about that, but it's true. And think more about who the people you're going to be working with are and how they act versus what the actual job specification is or the company. Um, get around people who jive with you, that you don't have to like do what they call like identity covering, where you have to act one way at work and then act another way at home. There is a certain bit of like, professionalism that's going to happen anywhere, but you don't want it to be super drastic. And so I know for me, that was definitely happening when I was working on the bench in the lab. I'd be the most talkative person in the lab. And so everybody's just kind of like, I just want to be, in my petri dish or in my 96 well plate, why are you talking to me kind of thing. And so now that I've been around people who are like inventors and, trying to change the world and all this type of stuff, I'm just a lot happier being around the startup people than I was around people who are like trying to make sure their error bars are as small as possible. So really think about the people that you're going to be working with, because that's going to be the main thing about your career. Everybody's going to come out with the same degree, biochem degree, global health, microbiology, thousands of people are coming out with it. So you have to find what makes you happy and go forward with that.
I'm going to echo exactly what Cuadro said, because I was in the same building in the lab covering my identity as well. And, I know everyone says follow your passions, but, I was also the most talkative person in the building and in the lab. And, the storytelling part always got to me. But I would say be genuine to yourself. And also a way to think about that is, you're worthy, right? I wish I would have come out of grad school, and maybe it was because, the economy was tanking at the time, but I wish I would have come out of grad school really being more confident in the skill sets that I had. I had a lot to bring to the table. Being a science major means that you have some level of intelligence that's already above the baseline already. So I wish I would have had a little more confidence to really put my best foot forward and really think about what is it that I want, because I deserve to find that perfect position for my personality and to contribute successfully to that. I know in academia it can be a little bit of brainwashing a little bit to some degree, where you are encouraged to stay in academia, and if you go outside, you're kind of seen as a traitor, especially for PhD students. But it's okay. It's okay to do science elsewhere. It's okay to take those skills outside academia and explore what's out there. And again, tailor your job search to your personality and what it is that you want to do.
I'll just echo what Amy said about confidence. Is I didn't apply for jobs because I felt like I had to meet all the qualifications, or that my particular experience wasn't up to the level that I maybe thought they were expecting. And same within interviews, or in the early days, talking about my skills, I'd like downplay it, be like, well, like I just did a little bit and it wasn't that big of a deal. No, you have experience. There are people that have experience, like sell it, and that will set you apart from other candidates. So just be confident in yourself. Don't worry about being cocky or whatever. I think that's necessary to get in a lot of roles. You really do have to sell yourself, and it's because you have the skill, so it's fine.